Welcome to The Last Hit. I am your host, Lyric, and these two gentlemen, the hosts with the mosts. Dan Aux Harrison, Rob Dagda, Price, the boys. How does it feel that you two pretty much duo-handedly carry our broadcast team to be the best-looking caster team in the world?
I mean, that's taking yourself into the equation, is it? Or...
Oh no! Just look at you two. Look at the fan base that you have inspired, Rob. Look at it.
Dude, Rob carries all the heavy weight. Let's be real. He is the one. He is the one that makes our broadcast what it is.
All right, well, that's enough for me, guys. I guess I'll see you guys later.
And we can use that.
We're useless without him.
And that, in my mind, is the best way to start talking about LPL, getting Dagda all giddy up in here, because today was the start of something new. We got 12.11 coming on through. We're the last major region to do so. So we've gotten to see, you know what, NA, LEC, LCK's kind of take on the patch has been. But Aux, let's start with
and
you.
And then just not agree with them.
Exactly. And then just keep doing what we're doing. But Aux is like an encyclopedia of patch notes. He'll hit me with something from like 2 seasons ago of like, do you remember on 9.4 where they changed Annie's base E to this? And it's like, my God, dude, you're insane. So you are someone who I know is well-researched with strong opinions.
Yes. So I think the interesting thing is the fact that with 12.10, the expectation was things would slow down and it'd be like a mid-patch, right? Like, this is the slowest patch you're going to have for a while. 12.11 will speed everything up because the outer towers got nerfed. And if anyone has looked at the numbers, so the way they buffed the towers initially, it was about a 10% buff at the start of the game. And then every minute from there on, the tower damage would increase. And the gap between would get bigger and bigger. So it's about, for 12.10, it was about 10% higher at the start of the game, and at 13 and a half minutes, it peaks at like 40% higher. And then 12.11, it started about 6.5% higher, and it peaked at 24%. So like it's a big cut. So the expectation for everyone was, okay, 12.10 is going to be really slow. You can't dive. It is really hard to do so unless you're like really crisp with it, or you bring way too many numbers, which means, perhaps you're giving up something on the other side of the map. And then LPL just refused to take that into account and just said, no, we're just going to dive. There was 2 schools, okay? There's we're going to dive and we're going to do it so good that it does not matter that towers are doing more damage. And then there was I didn't even read the patch notes, dude. I'm just going to dive anyway. And it would backfire massively.
Have any names,
sometimes.
Aux? Have any names?
I think Jackie Love and Mark, if anyone caught that. JDG Top Esports Game 3 specifically, when they... I feel like attempt is a strong word, but they end up under the enemy tower and it doesn't go well. Quite hilariously, but not for any top esports fans.
Yeah, so that was the expectation, right? Of that that now shouldn't be as bad if you're Jackie Love and Mark going for these crazy troll dives because the turret damage should get brought down. But I don't know. We didn't really see anything pan out the way you just said, right? We never saw LPL really slow down. You still had teams going for the dives, even ignoring dives, right? We're still playing crazy aggressive. I tune into LEC and I'm like, 15 minutes and we maybe have 1 kill on the board. That is not us at all. And I guess to the surprise of no one, it doesn't seem like much should change on 12.11 then, right?
Yeah, well, I think 12.11 for me will allow dives to be more realistic in more situations. Because I think despite the fact that obviously we're still aggressive in the LPL, you definitely felt like there were less dives, right? There were so many situations where you'd see a slow stack set up and it's like, this is like prime dive time, and they just would opt out because they knew it was so risky. Like I said, the teams who were really good at it and there were clear windows, they would still go for it. And some teams would try it anyway, but like it definitely felt like there was less. It felt like things started to get rolling a little bit later in the game, which particularly when we have the jungle meta being like Wukong and Viego traded off, when those two hit 6, it's a massive spike, and that's when the game found some momentum. But I feel like, even with the towers being super strong, you would just put your aggression in different places. Like if you want to go and challenge for invades, if you want to try and find skirmishes, these things would become like a place where you could tailor your aggression towards. And now with the towers nerfed again, like bear in mind, the tower damage is higher than 12.9, but everyone is always also tankier. That's the initial reason they buffed the towers, is because everyone was going to be tankier and they didn't want tower diving to become a cakewalk. They obviously overshot it because, towers have armor pen built in 30%, the tower damage ramps as well. But now it's nerfed down. I still think it's going to end up being like, particularly once it's built up at like the 11-minute, 12-minute mark, where it's like quite a bit higher, it's still going to be a bit more threatening. But since everyone's tankier, I think we'll see like a return to when there's a stacked wave, there's going to be dives happening, which makes you question the the validity of picks like Kale, right? Because that was the big reason she came in the meta, because you couldn't dive her, and that was her biggest weakness.
Yeah, I think we got to see a little bit of that today as well, where we actually got a couple of dives starting to happen, because today was the first day of the patch, where we actually had like top esports looking for dives. BLG set up that dive as well, where I think they could have had a bit more help on it. But I mean, still there were a couple of mistakes coming through, even like Night roaming up top side for a few dives. Like, it definitely felt like that safety net of the towers is now gone, which is probably why we're seeing a lot of these champions now start to shake up a little.
Yeah. So, right, Rob, you're just hitting on like from what you saw today. So, how do you feel like? Did it feel much different coming on to 12-11 compared to like casting a few days ago on 12-10? We obviously had new things come out, right? Zeri was banned a lot, especially in the second series. We had her played in the first series. I believe we had a Xin Zhao pick today as well. The Taric got picked up. Do you guys feel like we're undervaluing maybe some of these picks that did get more buffed coming out? Because again, it didn't really feel like there was any much of a change today in terms of how our teams played.
I definitely noticed, say, some of the champions that were missing more so than anything else, like KO not being there, Swain not being there as well. Like, Swain was pretty much like super high presence, and we didn't get any of him. And we got to see the Taric attempt to come out, but I don't think it looked particularly well. But I don't think that was on Taric. I think that was more the way that IG tried to operate with them. So definitely there were like picks that you could see had started to creep in, and then obviously Viper Zeri was just absolutely goddamn insane. But yeah, it definitely, I think the main champions on the patch are still quite similar. Like, Jungle didn't really swap up because realistically we were already playing Lee Sin, and Lee Sin is still just got a buff. So Viego still looking really strong. Wukong still looking really strong. Like, Xin Zhao I think is cool that we're starting to see him come back into the meta, which is nice. But like, it wasn't massively different, apart from like sometimes where you go like, oh, this is a great Swain angle, or this is, you know, probably where we'll see Kale come out. Not seeing those picks was probably more noticeable than anything really new, apart from Zeri coming into the meta.
Yeah, I think I agree with Rob with like Zeri is the biggest change. Like, for anyone who wasn't watching what happened, so Zeri got buffed. And I know solo queue is different to competitive, but her win rate went up 8%. I've never seen like that much of a win rate increase. And then they hot fixed it. It's still way higher than it was before, but like, she was so broken. You can see in the hands of some like Viper, it's insane. But outside of Zeri, like, there's obviously a lot of tweaks in champions. I think the big thing of this patch is the system changes. Like the towers, Grievous Wounds got nerfed, or a bunch of items got changed. And it tends to be when those are the changes, pro play is slower to adapt. Because, like, for example, Zeri. If you buff Zeri, what's going to happen is teams will play Zeri. But if you, like, nerf tower damage, you know, and you don't give them, like, there's not a ton of time for them to adapt onto it. Like, something that's really egregious, like Kale, that super benefited from the buff towers, might not get played. But there might be, like, subtle changes to the meta that take time to play out, and people realize, oh, this isn't working anymore because of this change, or oh, this isn't effective, or we want this, or dives are more viable, so we actually want more engage in our bot lane to try and set those up. So I think because a lot of them were system changes, it'll take a bit longer than just, you know, obviously just today to see how they come in. I think something I want to highlight though is Grievous Wounds, because you know, they nerfed healing across the board because they were concerned with increased durability, that healing would become overpowered, right? What I found really weird was that, you know, you nerf healing, but you nerf Grievous Wounds at the same time. So where does that leave us, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about, you're playing into Soraka. What do you do against Soraka? You build Grievous Wounds. Oh, well, we nerfed the healing. Yes, but you also nerfed Grievous Wounds, and durability's up. So isn't that a net positive? And now they've just nerfed Grievous Wounds again. And if you look at the numbers, like the base Grievous Wounds, which is like Ignite or like the Oblivion Orb, things like that, is 25%. And then the improved Grievous Wounds, if you complete a full item, is 40%. Bear in mind, before 12-10, it was like 60-40.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they've gone from 60-40 to 40-25, and champions are more durable, so you get more time in fights to heal. I am just actually thinking, like, this Seraphine buff's coming up on the horizon as well. I feel like literally we could honestly see, like, heavy healing-based compositions, because what is the answer? Grievous Wounds is just, like, it's going to be mandatory, but it's not, like, going to stop them. Like, 60% to 40% is such a big change, and I really feel like you could have things like Soraka, if teams can make it work, would just be obscene.
Yeah, and I guess it even raises just value of picks you already have, like the picks that already have sustained, right? The Nami's being in the meta, things like Kalista, which go towards Shield Bow as their first mythic, and things like this. It's kind of crazy to think about how that small change, if teams take the time to like break it down, actually could be one of the biggest meta shifts we have with how much has been taken out.
When we look at like Xin Zhao coming back into the meta, right? Like, this is a guy that has healing built into his kit that does really well, and suddenly you're like, oh, well, Grievous Wounds and all are down. Great, now he can just heal his shit done and not have to worry about anything. Like, it works out great for him. You're looking at Viego as well, who tends to build a ton of lifesteal off Divine Sunder, Wukong's Divine Sunder, and all this kind of stuff. Like, it feels like you're just enabling these even more. And if we do end up with, like, Seraphine support and Senna AD carry and, you know, that kind of style coming back in, it's just going to be obnoxious. Like, it's just going to be so hard to deal with any of these things. And that's why, as Aux was saying, I was super surprised to see Grievous Wounds nerfed further when you are worried about, you know, healing due to the increased durability.
You know, I do got to say, though, it would be crazy to have that stuff come back in, but I would love to see it in LPL just because, you know, there's like a set number of teams that will not play things like Senna Seraphine. They will stick to Nautilus, they will stick to Leona, and they're going to try and figure out the way to go in and, like, beat it down. And I would love to see the LPL answer.
One of my favorite parts of this patch has been like seeing pro players getting caught with their pants down because they haven't really adjusted to the durability game. Like you saw today with Icon, right? Where Icon like flashed underneath the tower, was going to go and kill Knight, and Knight survives with like 70 HP. And you're like, that's the durability update. You're not used to this. And like there was so many times where I'd see that happen where players would like commit their flash, go for the cool kill, and you're like, they know exactly how much damage they're doing. They're like, no, they don't. Like their entire calculations are just completely off.
And you know what? I will say, I'm not saying it's necessarily in the LPL, right? It could even be not even in a major region, although I'm not sure, right? I'm not going to name any names, call anyone out. But I guarantee there is pro players out there who just don't read the patch notes and they just go, like, their teammates will tell them, oh yeah, this looks good, you should try this. Or like, they'll just go in solo queue and see how they feel. Or like, they'll look at, you know, the picture at the top of patch notes where like it shows all the changes. But I guarantee there's some, and I'm not saying a lot, but there are some who just don't like fully read them, and then they'll just go in and they'll make a play and be like, huh, my Everfrost route didn't seem to last this long. I wonder what's going on there.
I love Aux throwing shade, man. Aux definitely having some names in his head, but kind of walking back to what Rob said. Rob mentioned Icon, and it's a great way to pivot into BLG because they were one of the teams that played today on 12-11. And right, we got this news the other day about Icon being announced for the roster. And I'll be honest, I didn't have like the highest expectations, but I did have this dream. I had this hope that BLG would be like Cobra Kai. They would specifically be like that kid Lip. If anyone remembers the nerdy kid at the start with the weird lip that Johnny Lawrence bullies a lot. And, you know, they get the red mohawk and they become Hawk. I thought Icon was supposed to be the red mohawk that comes in, brings the aggression, flashing forward, pulling crazy Shahu flags. But that's not what happened.
How do you say? I didn't have high expectations, but I did expect him to be second place in the all-time rally competition. It's like, you know what? Like, I feel like
that was an illegal head kick, right? That was an illegal move.
Exactly. The point is, right? That dream that could have been was not what happened. Icon came in, and like even ignoring his individual performance, which was, I mean, there's a great tweet by I Will Dominate that shows Rob's face explaining that performance. But even in terms of like how they played, they didn't really play any different to how they played when Fofo was on the team. And sure, Fofo is in bad form right now, but like you still have Fofo with his upside versus Icon, right? It just, I don't know, after seeing today's games, it's weird.
I mean, Fofo's bad side is about the same level as Icon's good side. So, I mean, realistically.
I am going to be real. I feel like you could have brought Rookie in, and I'm honestly not sure it would have been enough to fix this roster. I feel like maybe Rookie, maybe that would be enough. But I feel like this, I mean, you know, we talked the positives, like potentially, like, you know, maybe Bin coming in gives them some new opportunities. I still feel like this roster is just like suffering from a lot of the same issues we saw in spring, and I'm not sure like these individual changes are necessarily going to fix it. I don't know what is going on behind the scenes, or you know, between team comms, or like how they want to play the game, that they just end up feeling like so disconnected. But I'm really wondering what would fix it. Like, who would you have to bring in that would like somehow make the difference? So if it is a matter of not like changing players, it's a matter of somehow ironing out these issues. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, you could see today, there was a couple of times where I was looking at like, oh, you know, like this would be a moment where you could link up in the mid lane and make a play. Or you could have, I mean, the one that I pointed out in the cast was like, Icon had full wave push mid and the opportunity to go bot lane for that dive, and BLG botch the dive because they just don't have enough damage. And I'm just looking at Icon going, you could be there. Like, you should be in position to make this play happen. And it still just feels like no matter what they do, they're still not coordinating properly on the map. And it just ends up going completely to pieces. And even then in team fights, like, I don't know, they just seem to be all on different pages as well, where people are engaging when like Doggo isn't in position or they're all over the place. And I think, honestly, I agree with Aux. Like, the only way I see this team working is if you pretty much blow it up, you keep the bot lane and just build around them. Like, that's the, like, Doggo and Crisp are the only part of this team that's actually holding together.
You know, it actually makes me wonder what their communication's like, because recently Weibo came out with their like a comms episode. I think I linked it to you guys the other day. It surprised me how much as a team, like how little communication there was between Weibo. And it's like, Weibo aren't a team that have been super good at like connecting and transferring pressure on the map really, right? So it's like, you know, that comms video is maybe a good indication of why they don't do it. And it makes me wonder if BLG maybe in the same boat, right? Maybe you just don't have enough vocal members. But that's just so crazy to me considering that they do have Crisp. And Crisp even like tries to impact the map. He had his Bard game the other day, even like times roaming on like things like Nami, trying to impact the map. Like whatever he's on, Crisp is trying to find a way. So it's just so weird to me that
he's trying to find way more than a way.
he really is. And that's the crazy thing to me, right? It feels like only one more member would have to be on the same page for it to look a bit better, right? Whether it's Weiwei or if it was Fofo or now Icon, just like support plus mid or jungle, maybe it could be a little bit better. You don't expect much out of Doggo or Bin, but...
You know, I said that Rookie might not be enough. Maybe I'm actually wrong. Maybe Rookie, like, maybe they need someone like Rookie or Xiaohu. I feel like Xiaohu, like, on this team would make it work, right? He would piece it all together, and he'd be like, listen to me. Especially Bin. He'd be like, Bin, I will tell you what to do. He's very experienced with that. But
you will die for me again.
They just need that glue. They need. I feel like they need a leader. And as much as Crisp you would think would be someone, it's clearly not enough. And I think that's maybe part of the issue as well, as like, this is a roster that everyone came in thinking, you know, this is like a super roster, a lot of veteran players. People are concerned maybe about the ego clash. Maybe that is that, like, they have different views on how to play the game, and instead of going, okay, let's come to agreement, they just try to play their own game at the same time. It does feel like on different pages.
That's part of it. Because when I look at like V5 in the past, right, PP God was the shot caller alongside Weiwei on V5. Then you get Crisp coming in, who's got his own very unique style that FPX were playing as well. It feels definitely like there's a clash, I think specifically between those two, where it doesn't really feel like they ever want to be on the same page. And even then you'll have times where like Weiwei's going for these engages, like Crisp and Doggo aren't in a position, and it's like, oh well, Weiwei trying to almost prove that he should be the one that's in control of the shot calling. And I don't know, it just feels like that's where the big disconnect is for me, especially when you think, oh, you have two players that are quite smart about how they want to play the game. The fact that they're not working together, just it only amplifies that issue even more.
Yeah, it definitely feels like...
I just want to be clear correctly for the viewers, because it sounds like we're really ragging on BLG. Like, the reason we're ragging on them so hard is because the expectation is so much higher for the players on this roster. Like, obviously, you know, this team can still punch down and comfortably beat like lower tier teams just because of the raw skill. But really, Spring as well, it's just been such a disappointment relative to what you would expect with the players they have.
Well, that's the thing. They aren't even punching down anymore. Like, they just came off the loss of to anyone's legend, right? Like,
dude, anyone legend.
Really...
we'll move on to that later. They are fantastic, dude.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, look, to be fair, they have been playing great, but I mean, realistically, this was a team that didn't even make playoffs, right? And now they're losing to them. Yeah. So I think if that isn't a wake-up call for BLG, well, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, it feels like the shakeup, like kind of summing up, at least my takeaway from what you guys are saying, is maybe just a shakeup between like mid-jungle support seems like what it needs. I don't feel like changing Doggo or Bin should influence too much. Like, those two are like players, it looks like you slot around a core, not try and bring in whatever else, like a Loken, like JDG saying how much he helped them for communication. And this team can be okay. I don't know how much more we'll see of Icon, especially after I remember Dagda mentioning the packages, the package timings that Aux would definitely enjoy.
I don't want to talk about it.
Hey, look, I mean, he destroyed that Grump. That Grump had no idea what had just hit it. And, you know, he got some healing, he got some gold. And if that isn't value, I mean, if you look at the extra gold that he picked up quicker because of that package from Grump, I mean, you can't tell me that's not worth.
You know what's great? So in our LPL stats, we have a Gromp stat. Now I'm happy to know Icon will be one of the only non-jugglers to have a point in the Gromp stat. Great job, Icon. Maybe that's enough to justify seeing him more. But, I mean, okay, BLG mid lane, up in the air. This roster needs to get it together. We had another roster announcement recently. This had been rumored for a while, right? FPX announced they picked up Summit, played for Cloud9 in spring, played on a number of different teams when he was in the LCK.
Was MVP of the LCS in the regular season.
Regular season MVP, but still seemed like at the end of his tenure of Cloud9, seemed like a lot of people thought he got figured out. Every game of their playoffs, things like Gnar and Jace were banned, and just the word was his champion pool wasn't deep enough. He required too much attention for how he played the game. How do you guys think he's going to fare on FPX? Because if anything, that style of top laner is exactly what the LPL loves to have. So I'm sure Summit will feel at home at least.
I mean, I feel like, if I was going to swap a player on this roster, I would have started with top lane. I don't think Shallow was the issue here. I don't think Summit's going to drastically change things. There's a certain other player on the roster I would have changed sooner because I feel like this is another player. I mean, I feel like this team just isn't functioning well, but which is kind of surprising considering, they did okay in spring, right? I feel like Hung and LWX should be a strong bot lane. Care looked good when he got brought on the roster. Like, everyone was very critical of Gory, understandably. He really did flop in the LPL. But man, I just feel like Clid is just... It's been bad. I had no other way to spin it. I was trying to think of like a better way to phrase it. No, I think Clid has been really bad. And the fact that this team is 0-4 so far is worrying. Like, really worrying. And I know, like, you can definitely say, okay, they've had a harder schedule. They played up against
EDG, RNG, V5,
EDG.
and IG.
Yeah, I think IG are the one that you feel like they should have had some contestation, but I mean, even then, like, I know they took a game of EDG, but I feel like this team just hasn't looked convincing. Like, again, they took a game of RNG, but I feel like there's so many holes. I feel like Clid I just haven't been impressed by. And again, this is kind of similar to BLG, where you would hope for more based on the roster. Like, I think Hung's a fantastic support. And I was really excited for him with this meta where we're seeing like more enchanters come in, because he had that amazing Lulu game last split where he just completely denied the enemy Rakan. And then it's just like, it feels like it is not working.
Yeah. So I actually kind of have the counter opinion of what I've seen from FPX so far. I genuinely feel like this FPX team is better than they were in spring. I feel like their mid game overall, I feel like FPX's mid game is like 10 times better than what it was before. We've seen them, I think, flip one Baron in this split.
Okay, yeah, the Baron thing, but they kind of fixed that towards the end of the split. But
no.
Yeah, okay.
But even beyond that, like, there was 2 games where FPX this split loves stacking early dragons. We almost see Clid go for it like the second it comes up, and they've done it twice against 2 different opponents. I actually think you guys casted both the games. One was the Fiora game where they forced the early soul point, make the enemy team over-invest into the dragon, and then that Fiora game, right, they were able to split push those inhibitors down, TPs into the fight, they get Baron. And then FPX did the same thing, I think, against RNG with the Kale, where they're just making these like smart mid games to force enemy teams on Dragon and just making really good rotations off of it. The place I feel like FPX has looked worse is their early game, right? Which was their best point in spring, was like the dominating 2v2 and then jungle just playing around that. I feel like LWX and Hung are still just as flippy. It just seems like they're not coming out like heads as much as they were before. They've even leaned into a bit more scaling. And I feel like the big thing is Clid just looks... I mean, Clid looks even worse than he did in spring. I feel like in the 2 wins they had against EDG and RNG were his best games, but, I mean, that's not saying much when you're 0-4, right? But
this is the thing, right? Like, FPX's mid-game 100% is a lot stronger. And in the 2 games we've seen them ahead, their mid-game has been spectacular. But when they have absolutely just been wiped off the map in the first, like, 10 minutes of the game, the mid-game means nothing. Like, that's the big problem. And I think that's why I like this team. For me, looks a lot weaker. And I agree with Aux. I think Clid has been really, really poor. Especially when you can see, like, out of Aux and Hung, there's been, like, times I did, like, a quick section on it where I was like, oh, like, they're playing aggressive because Clid is literally, like, 3 feet that way. Like, they know that he's going to be there. And then they die, and Clid eventually just turns around and goes, oh, I should have been here. Oh, yeah, it would have helped if I had been there. Maybe if I'd flashed, I actually could have helped you. Oh, that's a rush. It feels like it's someone who's like, what's it called? malicious compliance. Is that the subreddit?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
It feels like Cleat is like, well, I am here, but I'm actually not doing the thing that I should be, so you actually do end up falling down. And that's what it feels like when I watch Cleat, is like, oh, he is technically around where he should be, but he's just not doing anything when he's down there.
Which is almost worse, because you could forgive him if he didn't know where he needed to be. But the fact
Yeah.
you're there, you're not
Yeah, that's what makes it worse.
Sorry you guys ended up dying. I guess someone needs to push the wave in. I'll take all these minions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clid definitely.
I think,
well, just looking rough overall.
I think that's the thing, is that, like, I kind of agree. I agree with the mid-game points, but it's so rough seeing them, like, struggle to get there. And I mean, I guess you can kind of argue in this meta. I mean, I feel like what's more egregious in this meta, like, you should be more able to not fall apart in the early game. Like, I feel like early game teams aren't able to make as many consistent plays as they were in 12-9. Obviously, 12-11, expect more. But it feels like getting punished in the early game shouldn't be as much of an issue. We saw the top teams who went to MSI, so many of them were prioring early Heralds, and it kind of feels like early Dragons is more of the play now, because, you can lean a bit more into the scale of things like Kale are available. And so, considering FPX have improved their mid game, but the early game is weaker, they should be looking better. This should be like a better meta for them, and yet they really are struggling. And again, I think Clid doesn't have to do much. I'm not saying like Clid needs to become Tian like in playoffs last split. He just needs to like a little bit more. Just you're there.
It's even
protect your lanes.
Even in the games, like the games they won, seriously, the games, the one game against RNG, the one game against EDG was like off of Clid and Care playing so well together, invading the enemy jungle, linking up bot side, which is like the weird thing to me, because I would have thought it'd be a lot harder for FPX to improve their mid game than it would be to, you've had players who have played at a level before. I just can't imagine it should be harder to get there than it would be just learning completely new concepts, right? So that's why this team's so weird to me, because their series against EDG and RNG were very good. But then you have like the IG and BLG series, or V5 and IG, I think, two teams who you should be able to at least put up a fight with, and then you get 2-0'd. So that's why I think this FPX team is so weird. I have no idea where they'll end up. I think their ceiling still looks like they can like get somewhere in the middle of the table and hit playoffs. And I agree with Ox's original point going back to Summit. I don't really feel like Summit changes anything. I feel like Shalahu is 50-50. He's had some good games, had some bad games. He's not the problem of this team at all. He's had some great moments to split push points in mid-game that I talked about. So I think this is really weird. And if anything, I think it'll actually hurt the team more than what it could do to help.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's to hit on another kind of tangent from Ox's point, like it feels like this is a meta where when you look at like what FPX wants to do, right? Aggressive bot lanes. You look at like the 80 carries we have with Lucians and Callistas and all these kind of things, we can actually try and play aggressive on the bot side. To then not continue to play around that lane just seems bizarre to me. Like the fact that they're so egregiously messing it up. And I think that's why we're seeing kind of the coin flip from LDX and Hung in a lot of situations, is like LDX and Hung are still playing the exact same way,
yeah,
but they just don't have the backup to be like, oh, well, now I have my jungler to come down and help me with all the summoner spells I just burnt. Like, there was that set game that Hung played, and I was like, he has burnt Viper and Mako's flashes at least 3 or 4 times at this stage. And Clade is just like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. But you're like, what are you on about? Like, I don't know. Anyway, it's just, it seems like the way to play the game should be right there in front of you, and to not double down on that just doesn't make any sense to me, because you can't just play around these strong early games, then stack the dragons as Ox is talking about, and then the fact you have a stronger mid game is just brilliant. Like, that should be the reason FPX now start to shoot up in playoffs, but instead we're seeing them going the complete opposite direction, and it's so frustrating to watch, because they are still they can still be a fun team to watch and to cast. Like, as you said, like LUX and Hung are still going absolutely crazy in the bot lane, which is great and fun, but it's just sad that we're not actually getting to see this improvement really pay dividends for them.
Yeah, well, at least when we look forward in the schedule, their next opponent should be, you've faced a bunch of hardest teams, and it's Toppies. I have to go 0-5.
Hey, but
it's okay. Then in 2 games time after that, they have JDG, so that'll be an easy one as well.
Hey, but
God,
then
if they lose to, they could, like, realistically, FPX probably will lose to Top Esports, so they'll get smashed through the early game. Could lose to RA, though that one's definitely not nearly as decided, and then we'll play JDG and probably lose that one. It's like, if they lose that series to RA, you could comfortably see them go 0-7 to start the split.
I gotta say, I really can't imagine it happening. Like this FBX team losing to RA, I feel like would feel more egregious to me than them losing to like IG or V5, who both look like pretty decent. But the thing I'm scared about for FPX is just like it's very easy when you're in a team that if you start losing, tensions just get really bad. It gets like really negative, and it becomes hard to even pull yourself out, even if you do end up beating like some team that you're expected to beat, right? So, yeah, I don't know. This FBX team isn't a tough one. They're definitely going to pick it up in terms of just their schedule will get easier. They will not stay winless throughout the split. But another team we hit on earlier that they played, right, was RNG. Because last week, when we'd done the last hit, RNG still hadn't debuted. We've now had them debut. They have played 2 series. They beat FPX. They beat Weibo. Both went to 3 games. But I feel like overall, RNG with Breathe still just looks like the same old RNG, just without having to worry about someone constantly doing shenanigans in the top lane. So overall, big win for RNG.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well as like people's expectation was, I mean, my expectation, especially as we saw them after MSI last year in summer, they started the split 1-6 because obviously having, spent so much time on this extended patch for MSI, commit so much time into it, you have like a short break into the new season, and especially when you have big patch changes, I was like, if RNG struggle, it'd be completely understandable. And to be fair, like FPX are like not looking the hottest at the moment, and Weibo, as much as they are like definitely an upper end team, they're not like one of the big ones. It's still RNG looks so clean. Like it feels like they've just carried on that form from MSI. As you said, Breathe I think is a fantastic fit for this roster. He played Sejuani. Like no way I would expect Vin to be doing that, right?
No. Maybe he should with how strong it is in lane.
Hey, to be fair, Bin did just, randomly blind pick Sion today. So maybe Bin is trying to turn over a new.
Let's go.
Yeah, maybe he sees Breathe playing Sejuani. He's like, that's what I have to do. I have to play tanks. But yeah, I mean, I feel like Breathe has been a fantastic addition. I think the team play.
I just have this picture of like Bin trying to win back his ex. Is like, I can do it too. See?
Oh man, poor dude. But yeah, like there was that Xiaohu Lissandra. It's such a weird thing. Like we saw the Lissandra counter to Ari and we're like, oh yeah, great counter, works so well. And then Xiaohu's like, no, Lissandra counters everything. And he just, no, we'll pick it in any situation. But I feel like especially when we've seen something that was hit on with RNG a lot is like the Enchanter meta coming in might not be the best for RNG because they tend to rely on on Ming being on Engage, and they're like, no, just stick Xiaohu on the Engage, put him on Lissandra, and he like there was that fight around Dragon that I can specifically remember where he just dictated the whole fight.
Yeah,
he's like, I will decide who dies. Yeah, he's like, I decide who dies. You guys just follow up, and it's like, I mean, just such good play from him, but also it seems like the team has adapted well to the new patch and is just like constantly hitting their stride, especially as like, we talk about that as much as we didn't see as much reduced aggression, there was still some with the towers. Scaling has definitely been more a formidable factor. RNG are a team who like, their biggest issue in spring was getting clapped early by like top esports in playoffs. So the fact that there's less ability to do that now, they should be vibing.
Yeah, I think they look absolutely spectacular. And I'm delighted to see that they did kind of come into the meta, like, feeling a little bit more comfortable. I think they did benefit. We kind of touched on this the last day, where there wasn't a massive shift in meta coming in from, like, MSI into the new patch, even though there were some picks like Swain and Kale and stuff like that. But even now, we're starting to see those fall away, and we are kind of settling back into something that's been quite comfortable for them. And even, I think, Breathe, again, just the perfect addition for them. Someone that if you want to give resources to can do stuff. If not, he's happy to play his Gangplank. He can even bring out stuff like the Sejuani now, and they just leave him to it. Like, it works out perfectly for them. So I genuinely think we might see RNG just end up going like 2-0 for the double split. Like, we could actually be looking at a golden road.
Yeah, I feel like that's the biggest thing that Breathe brought. Is just, since he's flexible with his champion pool, right? That was one of the things that also unlocked Ming, is not just having Xiaohu, but knowing his top laner can play carries. Because remember, whatever game he played Sejuani was one of the games where we had Ming on an Enchanter. And it's just so nice to see that RNG having the options, because I do still feel like some people came in with too high of expectations of how the Breathe thing would go. Again, I was hearing like, oh, Breathe just going to clap everyone, RNG just going to like seriously 2-0 across the board. And it's like, no, that was not reasonable. Like, again, it was going to be a slight upgrade for how RNG can play, not even necessarily in terms of like the 1v1 player swap, right? So RNG, though, going for the 2-0, like I feel like it's obviously kind of pointless to predict who's going to win LPL, but would you guys still say it's fair to say with how the meta's shaken up and kind of seeing how everyone else is currently playing that they are at least the statistical favorite to once again take the title?
I mean, from my perspective, yeah. I think RNG still look the strongest. Look, there has been, like, don't get me wrong, like the game one against FPX was a little bit shaky and stuff like that, but I think from the standpoint of decent enough early game now with the changes to the meta, their mid game has still been their strength, and that seems to be really what's dictating everything at the moment. I just don't really see a team that can match them. Like JDG, I think, is probably the closest contender, but I don't think JDG's mid game has been as clean. And I think JDG still relies so heavily on, like, hey, getting bot ahead to let them play their mid game, that if they don't, I think JDG's mid game just completely crumbles. So I think that's where I give the edge to RNG, where I've seen RNG come back from deficits. I haven't actually seen this new JDG really find their footing when they start to fall behind.
Yeah, I agree with Rob. I think they look like the favorites. I think, you know, as I said, talked about the addition of Breed, the carry on from MSI form. I will say though, like, you know, a lot of people talk about Bin as being like this wild card where, like, you know, Bin could just like pop off, you know, a lot of volatility between his top and bottom level, which wasn't really what like RNG wanted to work with. Like RNG feel like a team where, you know, when they get that game plan going, they're very effective at doing so, especially in the mid game. I could see, like, unless a team like absolutely steps up, they will just end up, you know, being on top. I feel like we need to see a big improvement of form. And there is teams that I think, like, for example, Top Esports are a team who, like, the difference between their best performance and their worst performance is quite stark. So I feel like if Top Esports come in and, you know, they just have like a fantastic finals, fantastic playoffs, I could see them, you know, beating RNG. I'm not even sure that JDG would necessarily be a good matchup in RNG when it comes to like the later stage of the tournament, because I think, like, so when we talk about with JDGs, it feels like this is a team with excellent team play, maybe great in the sum of their parts. I don't feel like that necessarily is like, because I think RNG are just, you know, they have better team play and better individuals than JDG. I feel like you need to be a team like Top Esports who has like such huge star power and then also have like the form of your life if you're going to be able to dethrone RNG.
I'd agree, right? I feel like it's just about the teams with the highest ceiling being able to perform on that day.
Yeah, the only question mark still for me is like V5 with Rookie.
Yeah.
Like, what does that team actually look like? Because we haven't seen it, but I still don't know. Like, looking at what happened to V5 in playoffs last split, it's kind of hard for me to put a lot of faith in them just because we could see them just crumble completely. And if that does happen again, well then, like, RNG should just be able to take it. But I think there is just worth having that caveat there that maybe we end up getting Rookie back at V5 suddenly pop off, especially because we kind of talked about it before. Rookie has played 55 different champions over the course of his career, which is a third of the roster that exists in League of Legends.
Thanks,
so
Grandpa.
That's kind of insane when you think about it from that perspective. And when you've got like a meta that can be kind of quickly shifting or a lot of new stuff coming to the table, I think having a player like that can kind of slot into anything you need him to do is going to be super valuable. But we'll have to see if what that form looks like when he comes back.
Yeah, and that is actually perfect because RNG versus V5 happens this weekend. It's our match of the week. We obviously don't have Rookie just yet, so it won't be him. But I feel like this is a great way to tie V5 into this, right? Because V5, the only like truly undefeated team we have in the LPL. V5 are 6-0. It doesn't feel like they deserve to be 6-0 after the first two series that they had. But in their recent win against FPX, V5 actually smashed. They brought Karsa back in. Dream had some absolutely amazing performances and was just dismantling Care. And yeah, I mean, I feel like in a best of 5, like if there was no Rookie, of course RNG would win. But I feel like regular season RNG is mortal. Can V5 with Dream get it done?
We saw RNG get 2-0'd by WE and RA last split. I feel like, we say what we project, what we think will happen. It is never surefire. There is never it's never guaranteed. There is always some element of just LPL stuff that could happen. I do think like V5 have looked like they're starting to get to grips with Dream, and he looks like a solid player, a decent addition. This roster looks decent, but again, the first three teams they played TT, they played LGD, and they played FPX. Not exactly the hardest opponents. I think RNG should come into this as pretty stern favorites with the fact that Rookie isn't there. But I still think V5 are in a position to challenge. I could see this being like 2-1 favor to RNG is how I would expect it to pan out. Just because obviously we've seen RNG haven't been super consistent with closing out, with having like full series performances. And also V5 have looked good. But I feel like this is going to be like their first major hurdle to get over and see how this roster looks without Rookie. Because bear in mind, like, this same roster in spring only dropped 2 series the whole regular season. They were like the strongest performer in regular season by far. So, the expectation is that without Rookie, they will be weaker. But if they can, if they beat RNG, then clearly it just shows that they are more than just Rookie, right? Which is what we kind of found out about them in spring. I think a lot of people saw this roster as just being like mostly Rookie, but it was clear that the rest of the roster was like stepped up and it was a formidable team. But this would really prove it if they were able to take down RNG with Dream instead.
How about you, Rob? Do you think there's any way that V5 can get it done? Can Photic, PP God, the boys? Can the boys step up? Is there a reality? Is there a way they do it? What does Carson need to do? Does Xiaolongbao need to be on the riff? Do we need to sub Oxen? Tell me how we get it done.
Oh.
Yeah. We need to put Ox in for PP God and just have him take over. But I think I think that's where, like, kind of when I look across the board, right? Xiaohu, I just see beating Dream. I just don't see Dream really having a chance. I think bot lane, pound for pound, Gala and Ming, just stronger. I think Photic can look really good, but I think PP God and Photic haven't seen the super high consistency that I think a lot of people are kind of hoping from them. Rich versus Breathe, I think is going to be pretty even, to be honest. I don't really see it going like too far either direction. And from that perspective, like, I think if Carson can maybe get involved in the mid lane and shut down Xiaohu to a degree, maybe, but I just don't see that happening. And that's kind of where I just think RNG should end up taking this. Even if we see V5 starting to get early leads, I still think we're going to just see RNG kick it up a notch when we get to the mid game and just blow them out of the water.
Yeah, I feel like bot lane is the biggest disparity in terms of like how I think it'll pan out. I think that might surprise people since we do have obviously Dream in the mid lane. But I mean, Xiaohu is obviously like dominated in lane before, but still that's not really what Xiaohu's known for, right? I think Dream's going to be fine. But PPGon and Photic had like a great series against FPX, and I feel like I've seen a lot of sentiment around like how they're like one of the top bot lanes, but I agree with what Dagda just said about like their inconsistency, because I feel like in their first 2 series, PPGon and Photic were all over the place. They were getting, I believe they got 2v2 killed by TT's bot lane. I believe they got 2v2 killed in their following series as well. And like, sure, they found kills themselves, but I feel like we've seen them struggle a lot more. And especially where we're at right now with like Mako still, I think, being in the slump that he had from spring. Jackie Love and Mark, I feel like they're in a category of their own. So I feel like for Ming and Gala, they're just the best bot lane we have, you know? And you have to contend with that as V5's bot lane, who are solid and I think like can like keep improving, but still haven't hit their peak form. So
yeah, I think the problem is that Viper solo is the best part.
He is.
But then you add in Mako, it starts to drop a little, you know.
Poor Mako, man.
Yeah. I feel like there's definitely feels like there's a bunch of bot lanes where one person is holding the other down a little bit. That I will just say that top esports JDG game 3, Mark did not look good, but Jackie Love did give him a hand and also run it a little bit to sort of help him out. But that is kind of just the Jackie Love special. I kind of agree. I feel like the volatility of the bot lane, and that's the thing is like if V5 hit right, if like Karsa, assuming they play him, has like a fantastic series, and then the bot lane is also performing as they did against FPX, I still feel like that I don't favor them. I still feel like RNG will win 2-1, but that's the game, right? That's the game that they could get if they end up performing well.
So we don't have too much time left, but I love that you hit on the point about bot lanes and it feels like one always doesn't perform as well as the other. Because I feel like we have a team that's really spicy and exciting that I know you love, Ox, whose bot lane are both performing. Anyone's Legend are stepping up. They brought out the Senna Seraphine. Honestly, super cool to see them do and just kind of play that comp that it's so much healing and it's Swain in the mid lane. It just feels like nothing can die once it goes late. We see Xiao playing great in the jungle, and just overall, somehow it's working. How is it working, Ox?
I feel like there was times where we saw greatness from this team in spring, honestly, but it was just few and far between. I think my favorite thing about watching them, I love Chocho. I think Chocho was like the super aggressive player who's playing all these like engaged champions. I feel like set support is something like you can just envision him having a fantastic time on. And I was concerned about the shift in meta, like more enchanters coming in, but he's been really good on enchanters. I think Chocho has stepped up massively.
And he's not
he was
afraid
probably
to
my
pick
biggest
him.
concern. Yeah, and my other concern is like, a lot of their wins they got in spring was betting on Jinx, and I thought, maybe with Jinx not being this meta pick anymore, they're gonna struggle. But I think the main thing, the reason Jinx was such a good pick for them was like in spring, their team fighting, there was certain setups for team fights that were so good. There's one in my mind, specifically in the series against EDG. I've shown this clip to so many people. I've said it's my favorite team fight all of spring. That even in gold, ZDZ and Forge found these beautiful flanks to dive onto Scout and Viper, and they just decimate them. They're even on gold. This is a team who, like, everyone's expectation is going to be lower down in the standings. And I know EDG weren't performing super well, but I feel like the same concept, the same play they did will work against any team. And I think that's their biggest strength. Like, even in the losses they've had so far this season, like, there was that series against LNG, where LNG crushed mid. It was the Swain for Forge. They took Kled Sejuani and just completely bullied him out. Huge lead. And then they struggled to finish because it felt like despite having such a massive goal discrepancy, and I know, AL had a strong team fight aspects to the composition, but it felt like they were really challenging the team fights consistently. Like even the final fight to win the game was super close. And it's only because like Light ended up QSSing the Renata ult and just like cleaning up. But even then it was only 2 people surviving on LNG. It was like a close one to finish out the series. So for me, I feel like this team, I felt like they were inconsistent in spring, but had high highs when it came to those team fights. The thing is, I think they've been better in the early game, which has been a positive. And obviously you get punished less in the early game. And then when it comes to team fights, they're starting to show why I was hyped on them a little bit in spring. And I'm hoping that we get to see more of this. Like if they continue this run of form, I feel like they could make playoffs.
Yeah, I think my biggest worry for these guys is that I think they're actually going to have gotten hit pretty hard by patch 12.11, because with Swain not being as prominent, at least from what we saw today, I think Forge is going to struggle a little bit more, because it felt like Forge at least could play the Swain, play into the front line, and almost just be another body, right, to just put in front of Betty, to put in front of, like, say, again, the other nerf that I think is going to hit is like ZDZ on Kale, because when you look at that game versus game 2 versus BLG, the reason they won was Xiao Hu stole Baron, they delay, ZDZ becomes massive on the Kale, and they actually win the game.
Yeah.
So I think like having less opportunities to just go for late game and win through those late game team fights is actually going to hurt them a little bit. And I think Forge as well, not really getting the easier laning phase on something like a Swain, where he just gets to heal for days if he ever gets caught out or does something silly. So I'm a bit concerned about what that is going to look like. I'll be curious to see, like, I think his Silas and stuff is still going to look good. Like, I think those picks are still going to work wonders, but I don't think you can just go in and blind pick
Azir
Silas
or...
in the same way you did with the Swain, right?
Yeah,
so
and
that's where I'm just like... Yeah.
I also just can't imagine picking up things like the Azir or like any of these other control mage picks. They've just never really been his bread and butter.
Yeah. I feel like the Swain's a weird one, though, because like if you look at the changes, they nerfed his healing on his passive and his ult. They nerfed his W quite a bit. That does hurt. But like they also nerfed Grievous Wounds. So I'm not sure if like the lack of priority today is like an overreaction to nerfs. But like the way I think about it is like surely the nerfs to Grievous, like you need to build Grievous Wounds against Swain. I think everyone can agree on that. Like every game you're playing against him, you should build him. And since they're weaker now, I feel like maybe the healing nerfs, like it's compensated. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like I guess we'll see whether it like today was just like a day where they didn't play it. But I could see like AL still bringing that out. But again, as you said, like I feel like they don't have as much freedom to lead in the late game. The Kale point is very valid. I hope that they'll be able to stabilize on the new patch. But if this is like the end of their hot streak, that would be kind of disappointing, because I think they've definitely improved. I think as much as like the meta is favoring them right now, I think they've actually improved as a team. So I'm hoping, like, I don't expect this team to be like challenging top 4 or something, but I'm hoping they can like at least be pushing to the point where they're like contesting a playoff spot and maybe make it there.
And that's the thing. Like, I actually agree with you that I think they are getting better. And I want to see them do well. I think everyone on the team has a little bit of a soft spot for these guys. Like, ever since they were Rogue Warriors. Like, they're just lunatics, and they're just so much fun to watch. And even back, like, 2020, like, years back, they'd even have moments where they just would randomly beat teams. Like, you could see, like, they...
I think it was
RNG.
RNG.
Beat IG when it was the Shy and Rookie. RNG, they really beat. Yeah, there's a ton of teams that they really pushed.
And they were our base race team as well.
Yeah, there was so much fun. But that's the thing is, like, now that we're actually seeing it starting to come together, I think, like, it's starting to actually be like, oh, come on, guys, you could do it. But I'm afraid to put that much faith into them, just because I know what can happen when stuff starts to change, or if Forge doesn't get his right champions. I feel like this team could fall apart again.
Okay.
So you think they'll make World Finals, but they won't win Worlds, right? Maybe next year.
Yeah, it'll be AL versus RNG. That's the end. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, on a serious note, though, obviously they could make playoffs. Let's just make a pointless prediction right now. Do you guys think that they hit 9th or 10th? Do they make playoffs?
Wait, didn't you have them as like top 4 or something ridiculous? What was it that you had for, or was it AL, or who did you have as top 4?
Oh no, I have Ultra Prime as top 8. So that's
Sorry,
why I'll start with. I won't put AL in playoffs just because I don't feel like I can have Ultra Prime and AL in there. I don't know. There are 10 teams, but I remember Dagda listed last week of like how many teams there are. It's like, oh wait, a lot of those sound like they belong there. So I'll start with no, which sucks because I love Chocho. Chocho is one of the best players ever. He is so fearless.
And that's why I will say that they will make playoffs. I
Let's
actually think
go!
this team, I believe they'll make it. I think it's hard to call like specifically where they'll place or how far they'll go. Because the problem is like, you have all the bottom 4 teams of playoffs playing against each other. But I think they'll make it. I don't know if they'll go further, but I'm hoping it's part hopium, part actual belief that they'll make it. I think they've looked better. And I think as much as their score is good, sometimes you see teams with a score that's good and you're like, oh yeah, but they've had an easy schedule. But like when you look at AL, they beat RA, who's a team you'd expect to be close to them. They beat BLG, who are like a team who's going to be in playoffs. Like it's not like they've just stomped TT maybe, who have looked a bit rough. So I'm hoping that they should be able to pick up enough wins.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is a team that definitely can. And like I'm looking back at the spring split, right? And like if you look at 8th, 9th, and 10th, BLG, Rare Atom, FPX, they've just beat Rare Atom, BLG. I definitely could see them beating FPX. And especially with BLG in a slump, FPX in a slump, Rare Atom not looking as hot. Like there is definitely a world where they end up taking their spots, so they could honestly end up in
maybe
top
Jordan.
8. And,
do you get both?
Could beat Ultra
I
Prime.
do get both. I do get both because RA and FPX. That's just Ultra Prime and AL. We did it, boys! Woohoo! AL's in playoffs.
To be fair, I'd rather FPX in there than BLG. I feel like BLG is going to implode and they're going to all change next split. So stick FPX.
Hey, I'm just saying though, guys. Thanks for pushing the caster button that allowed them to make playoffs. gotta love the good old caster button.
Dude, have we located it? I saw a bunch of people on Twitch chat asking why don't we start the game, and like who has the button right now? The game start button.
Is it with a Sheen again? Last time it was with the Sheen.
I think we left it in there from playoffs.
Oh my. Well, okay. Well, sorry to anyone who's been watching the LPL, wondering why you don't start the game.
Blame Machine.
We worked out why. We'll get on it. Yeah. If you're ever watching the LPL and you're like, man, they are talking for so long, you should @ Machine in Twitch chat, on Twitter, wherever, and that will get it going quick.
Oh no. Okay. Well, this worked out perfectly, where we have enough time to talk about one team, and there's one special team we have to talk about. You guys guessed it. It's Ultra Prime, the best team ever. Because I heard the last time when Aux was on cast with the Sheen, he said, you know what? Top 8, Ultra Prime, I could buy it. I could believe it. I could see what Lyric's seeing, which can I see the best. And Rob, you got to cast their win against RA, where they actually looked really good once again. Sure, they dropped a game. In the other 2 games, though, Elk and Shousey just dominating, especially Shousey, I think, really having a great performance. And everyone buy your Ultra Prime stock now. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bot lane for them has actually been really, really good. Sorry, I'm trying to go back to actually see what the story was, because there's a lot of games in LPL, and my brain is
the ones I cast are the ones I remember the least, which is crazy.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what's the saddest thing is that Cryan honestly looked like such a absolute beast on Talia.
He did.
And Talia just got nerfed, so unlucky.
He was.
But yeah, no, I think Ultra Prime looked like a ton of. I think the thing for me was like we're actually starting to see like Zoom going back towards things where you can actually like play a frontline engage, which is always nice. The team fighting looked a lot better. Because I watched what was their series before this?
BLG?
Their loss, yeah.
BLG, yeah. Where they kept trying to almost play their team fighting compositions like a pick composition. It was really, really weird. And then they were just like completely whiff on everything. And then they were way overextended and ended up losing fights. So, I don't know. I'm a bit like hit or miss still in Ultra Prime. Honestly, like, I think I'd put AL above Ultra Prime with the way things are going at the moment. But, Yeah, I don't know. I just haven't seen enough from them yet to be fully convinced.
Yeah.
I think they're still a bit hit or miss. I think they're still very reliant on like a certain style or certain picks to kind of work.
I think they're very reliant on their
if
bot
LK
lane
Chelsea
getting
don't get
ahead. Yeah. Like it feels like if bot lane doesn't get ahead is where their like idea of what to do kind of falls apart. I even remember, I think it was in the first game of that series, Rob, the other problem that they sometimes have, where you were just begging Hacker to do anything. You're just like, Ultra Prime, you guys need to get ahead, Hacker, please. And like maybe 14 or 15 minutes in the game, he finally went around to like gank bot or something, and you're like, there we go. That's how it needs to be done. But yeah, it feels like those are the two things, right? Hacker, yeah. And bot lane can consistently win. Just going to be rough against, right, the RNGs of the world. BLG's bot lane having a good day that time, but I don't know. Ox, now that I've made you a believer, it's been documented on air. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Zoom has been a fantastic addition. We hit on that before. But I think I agree. Like, Elk and Chelsea, other than like the S tier bot lanes, and let's be real, at the moment, current form, a lot of these S tier bot lanes aren't looking as S tier as before. So, I mean, obviously, when they're in form, expectation is Elk and Chelsea will have some more trouble consistently winning bot. But for the most part, they look convincing. Hack is a big question mark for me. Like, we had that game, which was it? The one where, like, I think it was against BLG. Like, game one, he was into the graves, and he just did this stupid engage that gave Weiwei a double kill on graves, and I think Weiwei ended the game like 10-0.
Yes, he
like
did.
He just was like, I am now ahead. I like, he recalled, he bought a bunch of items. He's like, I am going to one hit every camp in the entire game, and I will flame horizon you and be a monster. And I was like, wow, good job, Hacker. And then game 2, he popped off, and I was like, wow, good job, Hacker. That was actually sick on the Lee Sin again. So I don't know, man. I feel like if Hacker hits right, I feel like this team can have good series against, other than like the very top teams. I feel like they could take anyone on. But again, that's the big question mark is Hacker. And I feel like I could easily see him just completely run it down as well. So
I actually just had an epiphany. Could you imagine someone like Shun on this roster? Like, just take Hacker out of the equation.
Don't say that.
Dude, this
Oh,
roster is so
God.
That
jacked.
team, I'd be like, oh crap, this
Rob.
is actually a team that like maybe is top 6, pushing upper echelons. The only problem we have with this team is just Hacker.
Rob,
like let's
please.
just say it as it is. Hacker is actually just the only problem.
Let me put you in contact with the owners of Ultra Prime. You need to be a general manager right now, my dude. You need to be a GM right at this instant. That roster, with how Crying is playing right now, give me that roster, please, right now.
Dude, that'd be so jacked. That'd be so jacked. In fact, you know what you do? You don't go to Ultra Prime. You go to BLG, and you go, BLG, get rid of all your players, buy Ultra Prime's entire roster, but stick Shun in, and then they'll be like, oh, yes.
Oh, my God. What a world. What a world where it came from, like, just the amount of criticism that we fairly gave to Crying to now being like, this is a top roster with Crying in it if you just change the jungler. It's been so fun to see, and again, it's just so reminiscent of E-Star days where Talia was one of his big picks and he was just popping off. But, guys, sadly, I think we're out of time. But I do have one more quick thing.
Dude, that is not sad, because I know what our last topic is that we
Yes.
don't have time for
Yes.
now.
No.
So-
No, I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna ask. This is the
End
only
the
question.
show.
We're gonna get your thoughts on this, and then we're gonna say our goodbyes. So, Ox, how TT versus LNG? Bit of a banger series, I heard. Reddit absolutely loved it.
No.
What went down, dude? Sell us on why you think
my
TT
lord.
LNG is the best series of all time.
Oh my lord. I think anyone who's interested in the LPL, who just wants to know what we're all about, should watch game 1 at minimum. It was a game where TT looked good. Convincing came out the door. They had a really strong performance at the bot lane, man. Puff 5-0 on Calista. I'm like, wow, man, I'm starting to have some. And then Yukal does this Destiny in, and I'm like, what are you doing? I've never, like, sometimes in broadcast, for dramatic effect, you say, I'm speechless. But you're not speechless, you're talking at your job. That's the only time I've ever actually I didn't know what to say. Asheen tried to drop it over for me to say something, and I had nothing. I had nothing to say at that moment. I was shocked. And that's the thing, it got worse, right? After that, we saw Doinby, because, like, now, enemy team gets ahead. It was LNG. LNG got ahead. And then Doinby, he's super fed, right? Super carry Doinby, 400 CS hack. He was so farmed on Corki. Packages in to the enemy Camille TF and just dies, and they lose a team fight. I'm like, wow, this they're playing catch, they're throwing to each other. And then TT, you're like, cool, now it's our turn. And we see UCAL, like, they're sieging bot inhibitor tower. The rest of the team are like a bit chunked, walking away, and UCAL just like flash gold cards in. Like, I was so perplexed. I'm like, what is going on? And then the peak moment was the end of the game where they were having a dragon fight. TT secured the dragon. UCAL is split from the team. The rest of the team are like not in a good position to fight. They're like, okay, we're gonna back away. Southwind even got Callista ulted, like, to safety. And I'm like, okay, they got the dragon. They're 3 dragons apiece now. They'll just and then Southwind just throws himself back into the enemy team. And I'm like, what? And then he dies. And then the rest of the team were trying to save him, so they all die. And then they just end. I'm like, what? It was honestly the most.
I love this. I absolutely.
I didn't even know what to say. I don't know how to continue. It was something. And like game 2 and 3, you know, there was still some moments, but that game 1, man, I can't describe it any more than I have, but it's like it's something. It is a game of League of Legends that happened.
New content idea. We have Aux break down 1 game per week in the way he just did. The passion, the drama, the flair that he sold it with. If you don't want to go watch that game right now, I just don't know what to tell you.
So that was the thing. I went to like a food festival on Sunday, so I actually wasn't watching the games. My phone was blowing up so much from Aux ranting in the group chat that I had to go and see what the hell was going on. And I'm sitting there with my mom and my sister, and I'm just like, what the is this? And I was like, look at this. My mom and my sister don't understand League of Legends, but I just needed someone to be like, what?
Oh my god.
You don't need to understand League of Legends to know that was not good. It was if you haven't seen it, I feel like, you know, if you go into it knowing it is a spectacle, right? You're not watching it to see the best League of Legends. You're watching it for what it is. It's worth watching. You should check it out. It is something. It is a piece of history. I know people won't really. I feel like people will move on from this. You know, it's just LNG TT regular season game. We'll move on. You know, maybe by the end of this split, people don't really think about it too much anymore.
No.
That's gonna be burnt into my memory for the rest of my life, right? I will be trying to fall asleep, eyes closing, starting to drift off, and I'll suddenly wake up and think back to UCAL's destiny. So just, you know, it is burnt into my retinas, and it will never go. It will never leave me.
See, that's why we needed to make sure there was enough time just to get through that. Well, this is the end of the last hit once again. Guys, thanks for joining me. I thank myself for you for joining you guys as well. If you're out there watching this right now, Dagda is on the LEC. So make sure you're watching the LEC. That is all for today. See you guys next week.